This course is highly focused on demos and very hands-on. But before we get there, let's briefly introduce what Scrapy is. Scrapy is an application framework for crawling websites and extracting structured data. Originally, Scrapy was built for web scraping, but now it's a fully fledged web crawler. The differences between web scraping and web crawling are significant and are useful to know. Web scraping involves extracting data directly from websites. You simply get the information that you need and then use it in some way. Web crawling is a much more heavy duty process. You download and index entire websites, save the data somewhere for later. Web scraping is mainly used for data analysis. You want the scraped input to feed into a report somewhere. It has a somewhat unsavory reputation, which is totally unjustified in my opinion. Web crawling, though, is performed by all search engines and associated with legitimate use. You want to crawl the internet to extract insights. Web scraping generally tends to be very local, focused, and specific. Scrape prices from Amazon so I can adjust my prices accordingly. This is what an e-commerce competitor might say. Web crawling is much more general. You want to get a lot of information when you use crawlers. Crawlers might crawl all websites linked off of Amazon in order to get more detailed information about products and sellers. Scraping is typically done at a small scale. You access a few websites and get the information that you need. This results in a specialized dataset. Web crawling is typically at a very large scale. You collect a whole bunch of documents, feed into some kind of big data technology such as Spark to extract insights. Scrapy is tuned for both. It was originally built for web scraping and we will use it for that, but it can now be used to crawl websites. Scrapy is an application framework and not a library. There is inversion of control here. An application framework typically gives you a well-defined template or format in which you can write your code, and your code is invoked at specific points during the running of the engine. When you use a library such as say Seaborn or Matplotlib for visualization, you call specific functions within the library when you want to perform some action such as display a graph. But in the case of a framework, you set up your methods and functions and the framework calls you at the right points in time. When you use a library, you are responsible for writing the application and determining the control flow. You invoke the library when you want certain jobs to be done. In the case of a framework, the framework defines the application. You typically inherit from some kind of base class, override the methods that you're interested in, and the framework will call you at the right points in time to accomplish your job. An easy way to remember how frameworks work is that they follow the Hollywood principle. Don't call us, we'll call you if you're interested. This is a defining characteristic of frameworks. Scrapy is an application framework and not a library, and this will be obvious to you when we work with Scrapy. Also, when you use Scrapy, you must know exactly the data that you're looking for. You can't just go hunting in the wild. You'll use HTML tags and CSS classes to extract the information that you need. Scraping essentially means that you tie your code to the format of other people's websites, which means this is inherently fragile. Your Scrapy applications have to be constantly monitored in order to check that the underlying website that you're scraping hasn't changed. Scrapy provides a component called the selector for selecting specific portions of a website. These selectors work with XPath HTML tags or CSS class selectors. Scrapy is actually a very powerful and useful application framework. It provides asynchronous callbacks. That means it sends requests to multiple websites in parallel. Scrapy doesn't wait around for the response from each website. It carries on and processes what it has. Scrapy also allows you to have very fine-grained control over your crawl. It uses the latency of the underlying website to see how fast it can be scraped. It's got good error handling, auto-throttling, handling redirects, and so on. When we use the Scrapy's asynchronous callback mechanism, it allows you to scrape websites at very high speed, provides the parallelism of multiple requests being outstanding at any point in time, and makes Scrapy fault tolerant. In the granular control mechanisms, Scrapy has a way to specify download delays between subsequent requests to the same site. This slows down your crawl, but it makes sure that your bot is not denied by that website. There is also a limit on the number of concurrent connections. You can specify this limit per IP or per domain. Scrapy also gives you a way to auto throttle your own crawls so that you're polite when you're crawling websites. This is extremely important nowadays because a lot of websites out there have anti scraping mechanisms and you don't want to run afoul of those.